on Twitter. And that was probably, gosh, like 6-7 years ago, maybe. And then getting to meet you in January in San Diego was just the absolute best. So yes, I do fitness programming, fitness consulting, education for trainers, all at a distance-based programming right now. The bulk of the work that I do is strength training programming for pregnant people and moms, again, all around the world, all different stages of pregnancy and postpartum. And then also doing education work for trainers, coaches, fitness and health professionals who want to be able to best support prenatal and postpartum populations in fitness coaching too. My life now is mostly stay-at-home mom. I have a 3-year-old and a 3-month-old. So things are a little bit wild. I'm often working with a human climbing on top of me or breastfeeding a baby and trying to answer emails. But that is the gist. I'm super passionate about helping to support women and moms, whatever stage or season they might be in. And while that is the vehicle is fitness coaching, the conversations that we have around it are so much more in depth and cover so many more different factors, which I know we'll get into in this chat too.
Yeah. That's so great. And one of the things I've really admired about you and the way that you present all of your information online, and I hope you share later your Instagram and that sort of thing, is what you're doing to take away the stigma that it has to be this perfect postnatal body. And we're going to get into that as well. But this idea that just do what you can, just move and do what you can. And all of your posts are all about that. Like you said, you'll have a child climbing on you and you're lifting a weight, or you're walking around and you're in tow with, baby. So it doesn't always look glamorous like you see on Instagram and the models, but it's something that I think we want to normalize what our bodies do. I mean, this is natural, and there's so many changes, I should say, that happen. Mm-hmm. And so I love that you've brought that out and you showcase that more, and we need more of that. So I really admire that about what you're doing.
Yeah. And the reality is that I wouldn't be able to run my business if I didn't show that part of my life, because that literally is my life. So if I waited for these perfect moments, they would never come.
Yeah, this is true. And that's actually another life lesson in general. Just do something, just do it. And then, you'll figure it out the rest. That's one big life, general business and life moment, I would say, to share, or mantra. Yeah. So I guess we're starting to see some people coming on now. What I would love, I see Karen's on. Hi, Karen. What I would love to do is have you guys start saying hi and where you're from. I always like to see where people are from all over. I know, Karen, I can speak for you. I know you're in California. Well, maybe you're not. Maybe you're traveling somewhere, but you are from California. And I would love to see who else is on as you come on, and just tell us, and we may in a little bit say more. So say hi and say where you are. The other thing, what I wanted to point out about what we're going to be talking today, this was supposed to be a health and fitness professionals guide, basically for health and fitness professionals. But we've received so many great questions from people in the community who are not health and fitness professionals. So I wanted to say, really, this is open to anyone. We just want to get good, solid information out there about postnatal fitness. Mm-hmm. And the other caveat to this, I guess, or not really a caveat, but important information is Jessie and I could probably stay on here for 8 hours and just keep talking. But we want to make sure the topic is primarily postnatal fitness. We will get into some other topics and things. We could go into anatomy. We can go into all sorts of things. But we're going to keep it more in postnatal fitness. We were getting some great questions coming in about UTIs and about sexual health and all sorts of things, which is great. And we will do other topics on that, but we're going to try to keep it more in the realm of postnatal fitness and that sort of thing this time. Mm-hmm. I say that, and I may be guilty of also going on tangents. I'm fully aware of that. And I don't mind if you hold me to task, but we'll try to keep it there. Right. I see we have Ariel is here, and Deborah and Emily in Bend, Oregon. And we have Brooklyn, New York. Oh, Deborah's in Brooklyn, and Ariel's in Prince George, British Columbia.
Yeah.
So we have a Canadian there, and Tyler, Texas. Heather's in Tyler, Texas. Oh, and look at this. We have Jessie Mundell's watching too. That's good. I'm glad you're tuned in. So this is awesome. So welcome to you guys. We expect to have more people coming on. And then also this will be available for a little while. We'll have the recording. So if you are missing any of it, you will be able to come back on this page for a little while. And then it will go into our archives. Okay. So let's dive into this a little bit. I'm actually going to share my screen just to do a few things. Let's see if I can get there. Well, actually, I won't do that first. We'll go into some other things. The slides I want to share, I think we can share in a little bit.
Okay.
So one of the things, the big topics that keeps coming up that we have on our agenda today is about body image. This is a big, big topic because we see in the media, there's a lot of things about get your body back in 6 weeks after having a baby, or you shouldn't, it's normal to leak after you have a baby and everyone should just, celebrate that. And all these different things are told about what we should and shouldn't do after having a baby and what we should and shouldn't look like. And so I know that's a big passion of yours. And I'd love to hear more on that topic because I know in your Postnatal Fitness, the specialist certification that you do, that's a big part that people it seems to resonate with them a lot, that's a huge message that you provide.
Yeah. And I don't think that we can talk about postpartum fitness or postpartum nutrition without tackling this mindset piece of the puzzle because, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but experiencing these huge changes that happen to your body and your body composition through pregnancy and postpartum can just bring up a lot of stuff for people about their bodies, about their relationship with their bodies. It can be triggering in many ways for a lot of people who might have been using exercise as food as a tool to control their body composition in many different parts of their life. So we always just want to have these conversations of body image with our clients or in the back of our mind as the coach, the trainer, the fitness and health professional. Just think it is so key to understanding why someone might want to be exercising in a particular way, eating in a particular way. It can impact mental and emotional health postpartum so intimately. So as I was saying previously, many of my clients will come to me initially for the exercise programming. That's what they think they want. That's what they think they're going to be getting, the biggest aspect that they're going to be getting out of my programming. But then we start to uncover all of these layers and we start to have these conversations about fat phobia and thin privilege and the specific ideas that are coming up or the stories that are coming up that they have about their bodies postpartum. And yeah, it just becomes this bigger conversation. And I know that I have wrestled with this myself for years and years. Really, it wasn't until my mid-20s that I started to really cultivate this more healthy and positive relationship with my own body composition. And it took so much work and it took so much consideration of the ideas that I had about my own body. And pregnancy, now 2 pregnancies, 2 postpartum experiences just keep shifting my ideas. I catch myself perhaps thinking certain things and then I just question why am I thinking in these ways? And so I know if I'm thinking it, I know if I'm going through these things, then my clients are as well. And again, it just impacts our relationship with fitness on such a deep level.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of the things that I see come up, I didn't say this in the introduction, but I have 19 years of experience as both a personal trainer, fitness expert, as well as physical therapy and pelvic physical therapy and orthopedics specifically. So I've also been working with lots of different women over years and years with these kinds of issues. And one of the things that comes up a lot is someone will come in and say, I have this awful diastasis recti and I want to get help for it. And what I've started realizing is when they say that, the question, one of the larger questions is it really that they're concerned about an abdominal separation, which is what diastasis recti is, or is it that they don't like the way their belly looks? Mm-hmm. Is this a cosmetic thing, or is this that they're just not sure what to do to strengthen their abdominal wall? There's a lot of unpacking to do. It's not just like fix my diastasis recti. There's this whole other thing that's going on in terms of they've never had a belly look like that before and they expect it to just go back. So there's lots of body image just alone, just on the belly. And now we're not even talking about any other body part just yet, but just alone there, we see that.
Yes, I think it's so key what you said about they've never had a belly that looked like this before. And that can be really uncomfortable for a lot of people. And it's just weird to see your body in this different shape that it's never been in this shape before, or it's way softer and way squishier than it's ever been. And it can just feel weird. So yeah, how we approach this with my clients is just finding comfort in this new body wherever we can. And even if it's not comfortable, getting to a place of neutrality with the body and just that this is what it is right now. And can we find peace with that at this moment? Can we not approach fitness? Can we not approach our core and pelvic floor training or rehab or recovery as solely in mind to change the body? Why else can we exercise? Like, what else can it do for us? Because there's so many more things.
Yes, that's great. It's shifting all of it. And then on the flip side, we've had people that say, I have a problem here, and this person that I'm working with keeps telling me, just breathe and think about how beautiful I am and how lovely I am. And it's like, there is some sort of but they're like, but I do have this specific issue that I want someone to talk to me about. So I think it's finding that balance, right, of bringing all of these positive things in, but then also saying, okay, but what's going on with my belly? It took me years to realize that there are some people that truly have a medical issue that's going on that may need additional kinds of care. There's some people that have overstretched connective tissue, and we can get into that as well, as truly stretched connective tissue in a different way. And some people truly just have loose hanging skin. So the actual, if they're concerned about their belly, for example, they're concerned about the way it looks, but when you actually look at it, it's more loose hanging skin. So that's a totally different conversation than saying, let's do 12 months of really good abdominal exercises and let's see what we can do. That can still be part of a program. You can certainly still do walking and strengthening. But I think there's these other conversations. Are you bothered by this type of tissue and skin? Is that what's really going on?
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. And I think that it's so important to bring that up. And we're not suggesting that you shouldn't be uncomfortable with what your belly might look like. It is okay. And that is completely valid to feel that. We just have to also address this conversation of how we're expected postpartum to look like we've never had a baby before, that our bodies have never been pregnant. We celebrate the pregnant body so much in our Western society, but we don't to the postpartum body. There's just this big divide to it.
Oh, that's a good point, that there is kind of like everything is like belly beautiful. And then you have a baby and it's like, you haven't snapped back yet. And that brings up another whole topic. I used to be guilty of this too. A lot of programs and things I would do would be get your groove back and snap back and, get back to who you were before. And I realized that all this marketing was just making people feel like they had to get back to exactly how they were before. And we understand we're not saying you can't necessarily, but this idea that you're always going to be the same exact, you're different in many ways now. But on top of it, there's also this other layer of just, things have stretched in certain ways and there may be some differences. Mm-hmm. So I try to get away from that verbiage in any of the marketing we ever did was, stop saying like bounce back or, just get it, snap back into place. Cause that's not going to be helpful, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. And this is all related because I think there's just so much discomfort in postpartum for many people that you don't feel like yourself and you feel out of control. And so the body is one tool that we think we can control. And sometimes we can and sometimes we can't. Yeah,
this is true. So I'm looking at some of the people that are on right now. We have someone that's from Ozdal. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. It's from Istanbul, Turkey. And Catherine, I'm not sure where you're from, but hi. And what I'd love for you guys to also, as you're coming on, to say where you're, what type of, are you a fitness professional? Are you a physical therapist? Are you a physician? Are you in the community and just looking for more information about postnatal fitness? So it would just be interesting to see what the backgrounds are here, just so we know who is on right now. So please let us know. So let me show you actually what are, let's see if I can get there. Yeah. So these are some of the hot topics we're going to cover. We may or may not get to all of it, but this is the goal. We're going to keep talking about body image, probably woven in to all of these conversations. Some of the big other topics that come up are strategies to promote increasing movement and decreasing fears. And I want to tell you, one of the things that comes up a lot is I was told I should never do a plank ever now that I've had a baby. Or I've been told I should never do a Kegel exercise, or I should do thousands of them. So there's a lot of this kind of shaming of you should never do this again, and I can't believe you did that exercise. So we want to kind of really talk about the movement, what's good to do, and what kind of decreasing fears around that. Programming and progression, that's a big one that comes up. And then I added little diastasis stuff because that comes up so much, questions about the belly and postnatal belly. Scope of postnatal fitness. This is a great question that I love that someone sent in. As a fitness or any kind of physical therapy professional, the question is, when do you refer? So you're working with someone, you're a fitness professional. When do you when do you refer? So you're getting to a point where you feel like they're not making progress or you're concerned about something. Who do you refer to and when? So hopefully we'll touch on that again, or we will touch on that. Is there a point when it's too late to do pelvic floor exercises? I love that one. A lot of those questions come up. And C-section versus vaginal birth, does it matter in terms of fitness when they can get back and those kinds of things? And then prolapse and leaking questions. So that is the goal here. I think we will dive in to just in terms of movement, and I'm going to tee that off to you and talk in terms of one of the things that you do really well in your program is describe that as well. In your online program, you talk a lot about just different ways that people can move and decreasing fear. So I'd love to hear more about that and what you try to impart to your fitness and physical therapy and health professionals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that I still hear this coming up from moms who reach out to me, from clients, from community members who are just afraid to move because they think they are going to make their symptoms, their issues worse. And so they're maybe not moving at all, or they are approaching all the physical activity they are doing from this place of fear. And number one, it's sad. It's just a bummer that we have been trained to feel this way, that we have been made scared about our bodies, and that we're not getting access to physical activity because we are not sure what to do, or we are just so scared in general that anything we're going to do, especially when it comes to strength training or more high impact exercise, I think people get really nervous about that. So yeah, this is just something that I really want to impart to the moms who are listening, to the health professionals who are working with postpartum populations, is that the movement can be the medicine in so many cases. The movement can be healing. And of course, the answer is always, it depends for every particular body on what is going to be helpful and what may indeed cause harm for people, because we can't leave that completely off the table. But in so many cases, increasing movement, increasing body strength, it can help people feel so much better in terms of their physical health, in terms of their core and pelvic floor functions, dysfunctions, or symptoms. And I think the other piece of this puzzle is just getting back to basics, that physical movement can be so positively impactful for people's mental and emotional health. And we have to keep that as part of the conversation when we're talking about postpartum.
Yeah. So a lot of questions come up about timing. So when can I start walking after I have a baby? Does it matter if it was a C-section or a vaginal birth? When can I start lifting weights? And then I'll just unpack this here, and then I'll just say, and it's yours again. And then also sometimes we see baby boot camp classes coming out. And, when can I start something that's like vigorous like that? And I have my own conversations and thoughts about that particular set of things, but I'd like to know what you normally tell the health professionals in terms of when they can start and get back to things.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So biggest point that I always try to get across is that people, generally speaking, can get back to some physical movement before that glorified 6-week checkup with their medical professional. So I think there's kind of two camps that I see: people who want to get back into all the fitness activities immediately. And then the other side of the coin is people who do nothing because they're fearful or for a variety of reasons until that 6-week mark. And I think that we can live in the gray and live in the middle a little bit more when we're talking about this. So for myself personally, for my clients, they typically will get back into some sort of structured physical movement outside of parenting. And that is a lot of work. Don't forget that at all, especially with a newborn who's up around the clock. Around the 2 to 3 week mark, my clients are getting back into our Core Plus Floor Restore program. And that program is available in the Postnatal Fitness Specialist Academy. So trainers and coaches do have something specific to go off of. They're not just making it up on the fly or guessing. So 2 to 3 weeks postpartum. And then some of my clients, and again, myself included, I was getting back to some strength training at 4 to 6 weeks postpartum. It is programmed in a specific way. It is programmed in a specific way that is going to promote healing for the body, cognizant of the strategies we're using in terms of the breathing, how we're handling load, how we are managing intra-abdominal pressure, again, in a way that is healing promoting, not that is going to be incredibly stressful on the body. So yeah, I think that we can get back to some structured movement early postpartum if someone wants to, if they're feeling okay, their recovery is going okay, and it is supportive of their physical and mental health.
Yeah. And it's important to know that we say this quite often now, is that really even after a year, a C-section or vaginal births, it can take up to a year to fully heal in a lot of ways. So some people say, I can't believe it, I'm now 4 months out even. And they say, I wish I was back to where I was before. And we always say, just keep taking it slowly and making sure that if you feel like something doesn't feel right, to get it checked. But there's not a marker that you need to say, oh man, my friend got back to her Zumba classes and CrossFit at 4 months, and here I am, I'm still just doing some basic exercises. Every person will be different in this journey postnatal, and that is so important to impart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you don't feel like getting back to movement early postpartum, you don't have to. You
Right.
never have to. That does not have to be your value. It's just for the people that we're often speaking with, movement is valuable to them. And so just trying to impart that freedom to them.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. And yeah, so the other question that even comes up too is about pelvic floor or Kegel types of exercises. And technically, we're always, when I'm walking around, or even if I'm sitting here moving, we actually are always getting a little bit of a pelvic floor contraction. You're always going to be getting a pelvic floor contraction and an abdominal transversus abdominis, and all of your abdominals contracting. So to say, don't ever do a pelvic floor contraction, or you should be doing thousands of them, those are both extremes. Absolutely. If you don't have any pain when you do a pelvic floor contraction or Kegel type of exercise, that's something that they can start doing even when they're in the hospital still, or in their birthing center, or wherever they are. That can start being done, but gently, just getting some activation of those muscles. Some people think they have to wait until 6-week checkup before they can even do any kind of pelvic floor or engage their abdominals. And we always joke and say that, you know, just bending down over a crib, or just bending over a little bit and coming back up is engaging your abdominals more than a lot of the exercises we even give. Mm-hmm. So to think that you should just, you know, lie there, not do anything. If you are ready to engage in some exercises, there are some gentle ways to get back. Just like you're saying, even within starting 2 weeks, you can start doing some gentle exercises.
Yes, for sure. And I think most moms would want to lie there postpartum more, and they're able to.
Yeah, exactly.
But we should talk about this more afterwards, but my diastasis healing after this pregnancy it felt different to me. It felt like I had more tautness, more tension regained sooner. And I really think it was just because I was also parenting a 3-year-old on top of it. So I was under more load earlier this time. Just a really interesting scenario.
That is interesting. And then the other thing that sticks out to me, though, is you could take someone just like you who was doing more load, and they may have had a different outcome too. So that's what's so fascinating, is everyone's going to be a little bit different on their journeys with this. But there could be a trend over time that you do notice that those who do preload more with these activities may actually notice they have, you know, better healing. So yeah, it's fascinating. That is interesting to see. And you have, you know, a test study right there in your own house, in your own body.
Yes.
So let's see some of the people that came on. I love this because we have a gastroenterologist, we have women's health and chronic pain specialist in Canada, a doula, and women's health PT. So it's great just to see what you guys are doing, so we have a sense of who's on here right now. And feel free to ask us any questions. As we're going through this, we're going to go through some of these, but we're happy to answer any other questions too. There's still the whole goal of what we're doing at Pelvic Guru and through the Global Pelvic Health Alliance is we're trying to make sure that everyone's on the same page and keeping up with the latest evidence-based research and how you're integrating this into your practice. Many of us don't have time to read every single research article out there or go take every single class, but there should be a minimal standard. So the things that I did 12 years ago, I'm not doing anymore because we've learned that that's not necessarily effective anymore. That's not the best approach. So I think that if we can get everyone on the same page, it'll make a huge difference. And this is part of this mission, to do these kinds of interviews and get you on. We have an aspiring women's health PT and a prenatal and postpartum focus. I'm not sure what specialty, Lindsay. Oh, you're the same person here. Aspiring women's health PT, who Lindsay wants to be a prenatal and postpartum focused women's health PT. That's awesome. Okay, so let's see. So programming and progression, those kinds of things. Actually, let's see. I'm going to see if I can jump around here because this may be helpful. I'm going to show you guys something about diastasis recti. Okay, this is something that I use just to in some of the courses we have, and it's very much just about looking at when you're measuring a diastasis. I don't know how many of you who are watching right now do measure this regularly or pay attention to diastasis, or if you're learning this for the first time. But we used to just focus on the gap. It was always like, look at the gap, look at the gap, look how much it's separating. Okay. And this is care of Mutu system stuff. It used to be that you looked at only what was happening at the separation. So that is one test you can do. But it's also important for us to see how deep it is. What's the depth? Is it really like you can just go in a little bit, or is it really deep? And the length, sometimes it gets missed that someone may have something that's way high up near that xiphoid, way at the top of their chest versus just, and all the way down at the bottom near that pubic bone, as opposed to just around the belly button there, the umbilicus. And you basically can measure it. Just a woman on her own can do it, or you can have a professional like us do it, or there are things that are more even like rehab ultrasound that's available. The other thing that we sometimes talk about is tension to task. So I got the to task part from Anthony Lowe in terms of when someone lifts up, are they having tension, or does it sink down? Can your finger sink down way more? Or do you get a coning or doming where actually you get something pushing your finger away? So we're looking at a lot of things, not just the width. Like we used to just say, oh, wow, your width is getting bigger. If that width is getting wider, but they have a lot of tension, like you can actually feel a good tension underneath your fingers, that is not necessarily a bad thing, and that's actually a good thing. So I'm taking a lot of research and kind of just quickly doing this slide to get us started in the conversation. I'm happy to, have us talk about anything else more about this. And then we have these slides. I just want to put this up here because this is the kinds of things we're looking for. We talked about some of this earlier: excess skin, doming. Is there an umbilical hernia? Some people think they have a diastasis, but it's really an umbilical hernia. We're looking at what the pelvic floor is doing potentially. We're looking at the tissue quality, what's happening there. Is there a lot of loose skin? And then there's different ways you can measure it. You can just use fingers, like we said. In the research, they use a 1/2. They actually use these specific measurements that you can use. So all of this I just put here to say that when we talk about progressions, as you said earlier, we have general ideas of what we should be progressing and how someone should progress through exercises, but it also depends on what these tests show. So if every time, I'll give an example, every time someone does a crunch, they go ahead and do a crunch and they get this major doming, so that you see this like pushing out right in that area where the diastasis is, that is probably indicative that there's a lot of pressure there, too much pressure in one area. So that's an idea where we want to back away a movement and see if we can get them to do a similar kind of crunch or other movement where they don't have that same doming, for example. But then we know there's some women who actually can do a crunch and you actually get maybe a little separation of diastasis, but they have a nice tension there. So I don't necessarily say don't do a crunch in those cases. They can absolutely move forward with some of those exercises just to engage the muscles there. Did you want to add more to that?
I think that was perfect. I do think that this, again, we have to take this into then all the questions that I often get from people are crunches okay? Can I do a plank early postpartum?
Right.
Someone asked me yesterday, can I breath hold in this exercise? And we have to preempt those conversations with a lot of this information.
Yes, exactly. So I think we're tackling huge things in this one talk today, but I think the general thing is to say, hey, if you're doing a general program that's for the masses, like you're doing, you do mass programs where you can't necessarily individually look at each person. We know some general things to tell you. So for example, I wouldn't tell someone that just had delivered a baby yesterday, I would not say, I want you to strap on about 400 pounds of weight and go and do the biggest, deepest squat you can do. We know there's some things that are just not appropriate. And we know that it would be okay to say, do some gentle pelvic floor exercises as long as you don't feel pain every time you tighten up. Those are the kinds of things, or gentle activation of abdominal wall would be okay. So those are where we know we kind of know the extremes. But in general, there are some things you can do to start integrating exercise and what's safe without pushing too hard. Mm-hmm. But I would love to see if there's any specific questions you guys have too about specific exercises or questions about when to progress, because that's a big one. Mm-hmm. I'm going to try to go back here. So this is something you have in your program. I'm not sure if you've changed the slide the way it is now, but I like that you've made it very simple so that women can do this even at home. They can check in these areas and figure out. Do you want to explain that a little bit, what you can have people check for?
Yeah. So And I think this is important to mention too, as you said, if you are creating mass programs for people, and that to a degree is what I'm doing because I'm coaching all my clients online from a distance. There is additional coaching in a closed Facebook group that goes along with it, but I need to make the programming as foolproof as possible so that the majority of people can have really strong success with it. And that's what we're doing with the diastasis assessment that you see here. So I'm getting people to measure their diastasis at 3 points at the belly button, halfway between the sternum and the belly button, and then halfway between belly button and pubic bone. And it's always more ideal if I can get a physio to get their hands on them, but I want them, again, to have some confidence that they can do this themselves. And if they are doing a repeating number of assessments, which they are in our program, a few assessments over, say, the first 6, 8 weeks postpartum, they're always measuring in the same manner. So we can get a general idea of what is going on. And there's just so many factors to consider with diastasis: what time of day we're assessing, how long it's been since they have eaten, where they might be in their cycle, if they're having a cycle. So if we can keep it as structured as possible, that is what we are trying to do.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've learned, again, over the years is someone will say, oh no, I just did it and now I'm a 3-finger. And then tonight, I went back and did it tonight and now I'm a 4-finger. Something's happening and it's getting worse by the moment. And that's an important, I love that you said that, even by the hour of what you've eaten or cycle times, there's going to be changes in our connective tissue in general. This is just something we know in general. So don't give yourself a break. And we always tell, I tell the trainers and health professionals that it's important for us to share that so that they don't also freak out about that there's going to be changes throughout the day. So I like that you said that.
Yeah.
So there's not a standard thing. This is what you've done, is created this. And then, like I said, there's research articles that show what they do in research to keep things standardized. But there isn't really a standardized thing that every single woman should always have it checked here and here and here. But it is important to have within what you're doing at your clinic or training facility to have your own thing so that you have a good intra-rater reliability, that you're testing the same thing each time in the same position. Because if you put one person standing up and another person lying down, and then you're not going to remember how you check them the next time if you are checking this. You want it to be pretty consistent what you do each time.
Yeah, and I remember that we were even talking about this at the Mastermind and Mentorship Day, just even the position of where someone might have their arms during the testing. So trying to keep all the various variables controlled when we can.
Yes, for sure. And I'm looking, we have, looks like Callie is here. She's the current RN, aspiring personal trainer. That's awesome. So you're kind of doing the crossover thing. You're making it over there. That's great. And then Karen is on a plane, which is really cool. You said, what do you say to clients are the resting width? Okay. I'm not sure exactly, Karen, what you mean about resting width, other than do you mean that when they're walking around or when you're doing the testing and they have a width already without doing any kind of crunch up? I don't know. Is that maybe if you can just explain a little bit more, but what do you know what she means by that, or in terms of resting width versus actually doing the crunch?
Yeah. And it could also be along the lines, I know I get this question a lot from clients too, if they're just doing that mini head lift and not thinking about the breath, or the comparison between doing a mini head lift and connecting to the pelvic floor, and the differences that can exist there as well.
Yeah. So I think too, some people when they're at rest, let's say I actually, this is the way I screen. It's not in these slides, but I think this is an important thing, is I actually mark what they are looking like at rest. So when they lie down, before I even do a test, I mark where they're at. I want to get a sense. And it also helps me to know, I go along the way and see. So if I notice that around the upper part, right above the belly button or the umbilicus area there, I noticed that they're about a 2 or 3 finger without me even lifting. That's a good sense for me to write that down too. So I'll put a 2 or 3. And then I have them lift, because sometimes it actually gets better. It'll actually go down to a 1. Or other times, like we talked about, they'll have coning or they'll have a wider separation. So I actually I actually delineate between rest before and during the test what happens. And I don't know if I think that's what Karen may be saying. How do you explain resting is for? I'm still trying to figure out what you're asking. How do you explain if the resting is 4? Oh, so you're saying if the resting was a 4 finger? I don't know exactly what you mean by how do you explain, but I just basically give them that information that we're assessing. We have a baseline. So wherever they are, the goal is, we always say, there are women who have really good tension of their abdominal muscles at that linea alba, who are actually at a 1 or a 2 finger separation walking around. And that can be really within normal. So I don't like to say, oh no, you have a 1 or 2 finger and you're walking around the world. This is terrible. We're just giving information. But if you're saying if they're at rest and they're at 4 fingers, if it is important, if it never changes, well, that's a good question. So if they're at a 4, when they come in, if they're at rest at a 4, I always say there's a good chance that it may still get better. You may notice that it gets to a 3 or a 2. There is a good chance. To say that it will be a 0, I can't tell you that. That's not even necessarily what we need to find for you or what could happen. But I always give them a chance that just by doing the right exercises and the movements that we explain, there is a good chance it can even be less than a 4. But I do give them, and I don't scream out like, oh no, you have a 4. I can't believe that's so terrible. It's giving them more information. But it depends on the person too. Some people, they may have a certain amount of diastasis, but really, again, their issue is that they're having so much loose skin. So though they're saying the diastasis is the issue, I can look at them and see they're a 4, but I'm more concerned that they're worried about the skin that's loose. So we have that discussion too. Is it really the diastasis at a 4, or is it really the loose skin? So I look at, yes, there's still a potential that we can certainly make that better, and we're going to work together to do that. That's my language. I don't say I'm going to fix you. And I also don't say you just better fix it. Just go out there and do it on your own. I always say we're going to work as a team to see what we can do to help you with this. So I leave a potential that it can get better, because a 4 is a little bit more separation than we'd like to see. But at the same time, I don't shame them or make it feel like, oh no, how are you even walking around like that? That sort of thing.
I love that you mentioned using we
yes.
are going to do this. It feels hopeful. It feels like they're on a team, that they have hope in you and themselves.
Yeah. And on that note, the other thing too is I've worked with some clients or patients who have actually had significant, we're talking, 7 to 10 finger, quite separation. And as soon as they stand up, they've got extensive amounts of, you can just see the forward motion of the whole belly and the contents coming forward. That can be very different than someone that has a 1 finger, basically not even a diastasis anymore, and they stand up and have a belly that looks pregnant. Mm-hmm. And they're 2 different presentations. One, and this is a very important distinction, and I think gets missed sometimes with trainers and other healthcare professionals, is that, and by the way, this is not taught to OBGYNs. When you go to an OBGYN and you have questions about that diastasis or questions about pelvic floor, they're not really trained in that stuff. So this is really where, we do a lot of this with training and healthcare professional stuff for physical therapy, occupational therapy. So in one case, they can have such a significant separation, and the tissue can be so thin at that linea alba that we could do all the best exercises in the world, but that person may have so much discomfort and so many changes there that really for them, the best thing may be to ultimately still do some exercises, but they may ultimately need to get some sort of surgery. So I don't ever shame someone for getting surgery, nor do I make them feel like, if you don't get better, I guess the last resort is you get surgery, because that puts them looking like they failed the program. I look at it more realistic for them and say, what I'm seeing is quite a wide separation. And I think that's the true issue here. We'll do some things to see what we can do to make it a little bit better, but it may actually be that the better alternative is surgery in your case. Mm-hmm. Now, the other person that comes in that has a 1 finger diastasis, and whether it's at rest or when they're walking around, if they, or if they do activity, if they have a belly that pushes out and they still look pregnant, to me, that's more the full abdominal wall connective tissue. So the entire abdominal wall is stretched. It's not, the actual problem is not the diastasis, it's the whole abdominal wall is stretched out. Mm-hmm. So that would be another whole thing we can get into at some point, maybe about what we could do for that. But I just bring that up to say that even when someone presents with a belly pushing out, you have to see, is it really the diastasis that's the problem, or is it a full abdominal wall connective tissue stretch? Yeah. Right. Okay. So we just got through that. Let's see here. So I put all these things in here. We're not going to go, we've talked actually about almost all of these. So let's see if we go to, I wanted to bring this up here. In the prevalence, this is interesting. For diastasis recti, one of the studies, they showed that in second trimester, 27% had a diastasis recti. And then this is always one of my favorite things to quote. And this is interesting. In MOTA study, when they checked on diastasis recti during gestational week 35 in their study, there was a prevalence of 100% of women had diastasis. So I know we talk about this a lot too, is instead of shaming it, going, oh man, I can't believe I have a diastasis, that's actually a normal part. It's supposed to happen during pregnancy. It actually does happen, right?
Yeah, it's an incredible function of the body to be able to allow us to carry babies till as full term as we can get, or after term. And I think that that is a huge part of the conversation that we often have with my clients too, is reducing this fear of diastasis. There absolutely is strategies that we can use in pregnancy. I always don't know the best language to use when we're talking about diastasis in pregnancy, because people always want to know if there's anything that they can do to prevent diastasis. Mm-hmm. And there's no research to suggest that we could. I think that we can talk about ways that we might be able to prevent the severity of diastasis if we're talking about specific fitness strategies, workout activities in daily life, and strategies around that. But the body is going to do what it needs to do to be able to carry that baby. So it is, again, reducing that shame, making people feel more at peace with diastasis and less like they did something terribly wrong to have this abdominal separation.
I love that you said that, because that is a constant theme that I see too, is people saying, I knew I shouldn't have gone to that one class. I went to that one exercise class and that's why I have prolapse and that's why I have a diastasis recti. And it's like, you could not ever pin anything on one exercise, one movement. It's just like when someone says, I threw out my back yesterday. It's like, well, your back just doesn't get thrown out by one thing. There may have been a variety of things happening in your life that were going on for years. And this is just kind of a final thing that you may have felt pain. So I think that's an excellent point to bring up, that the shaming around that. And we've even seen trainers and others say that too, to people like, I told you not to do that. I knew you were going to have more problems with your diastasis. And they just cannot know. It could have just been truly the body it's just getting ready. It's separating on purpose. It's getting ready for growth. So I think that's a really important distinction as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if you are just coming on and I know there's more people now, please tell us hi, what type of profession you're in, and or if you're just in the community, and where you are from. We'd love to know who else is here and what you're up to. Okay, so let's see what else. So this was another thing too that I thought was really interesting when we looked at more of the research here. The prevalence of diastasis recti among first-time pregnant women was 33.1% at week 21. So this is, again, earlier on, not at the 35 weeks. But then 60% basically after 6 weeks postpartum still had diastasis. So at 100% at 35 weeks, but even at 6 weeks, we still see 60%. Then 45.4% at 6 months, and even 32.6% of some sort at 12 months. So this is normal. This is normal healing. We could not do a single exercise and just go through having a baby, delivering, and you could still at 12 months have 32% would have this, but that it wouldn't be at 100% anymore. So there's natural healing even going on anyway. Mm-hmm. So I could think, oh man, I am the best pelvic PT and trainer in the world. Look at all of my clients are getting better. It could be that they're naturally going to get better anyway. But like we're saying, there are ways that we can help. We can promote the healing. There are things that we can share that will make a difference in decreasing pressures, increasing exercise and activity slowly. Those are the kinds of things that we can do to promote the best healing possible.
Yeah, I think that this is such key information for trainers too, who you can impart this information to your clients, that time is such a huge factor in the healing of diastasis, and you are not doing a terrible job if your client's diastasis did not heal in 4 to 6 weeks postpartum.
That's it. And sometimes you see reports of there's like this one magical person who gets every single diastasis better in 1 visit or 2 visits. Yeah. Guys, that bodies don't work that way. It would just like saying I touch every person, their cancer goes away. You can't, there's no way. I mean, the body's healing is doing different things with diastasis and all sorts of postnatal changes. And so I think there's a part of it that's just, again, remembering to respect that person and their healing and know that we are facilitators. I look at this a lot as what we are doing. We're facilitators. We're giving the best information we can. And this is why we do these talks, is to give you the best information in terms of research and that you can then impart to your clients and patients. Mm-hmm. So this is just one of these other things. People get worried. Is my age, height, mean, I thought it was like a meanness, and a mean weight before pregnancy, weight gain during pregnancy, C-section, baby's birth, all these different things. And they found that basically when they look at all this, they were not found to be risk factors. Those things were not found to be risk factors when you look at it. So someone says, oh no, I have this problem. So like, for example, even hypermobility syndromes or level of abdominal and pelvic floor exercise training they were doing during pregnancy or after, they cannot find one factor that distinctly says that's why they got diastasis. So again, keep this in mind. That's a really important thing.
And going back to this mindset piece of the puzzle where they mentioned weight gain during pregnancy, because I've heard this come up from so many people too, is that they were worried that they were gaining this amount of weight in pregnancy, that their baby was going to be so big and their diastasis was going to be huge. It's just so much stress that we don't need to be carrying in pregnancy.
This is true. I mean, you'll see people say, oh no, it's just expanding, I'm just doomed. And it's like, you have no way of knowing that that's going to have an effect. And the other thing is there could be one pregnancy that goes one way and another one that goes the other way. So you see someone says, oh no, everything went wrong. I had this diastasis, I had prolapse and everything during my first pregnancy. So that means I'm doomed for the second one. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's all going to go that same way. It's fascinating how there's so many variables for each person. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that is important. And then let's see. So this was also interesting too. There's a comment that a lot of people, or a general consensus that people think that diastasis recti increases lumbopelvic pain of some sort. And basically the studies, I know Carrie Bowe's done a bunch of studies now that are showing that essentially it doesn't necessarily mean that if they have diastasis, they're going to have more back pain and pelvic floor dysfunction like we like to think. But I will tell you, I think most of the research that was done, I didn't show it in here, is done for women who have 1 to 3 finger separations. That was like the general rule of when they were doing research. There are probably outliers who are 4, 5, 6, 7 larger diastasis. That's where you may see some lumbopelvic pain show up. That's where you may see more problems with prolapse or other pelvic floor dysfunction. So I think it's important to say it doesn't mean that if someone has any kind of diastasis, they're not at risk. But it's just that the normal range we see typically between 1 to 3 finger type of separation is probably where most of these studies are lying when you see that, is what I've noticed. All right, so let's see. Do you want to add anything to that? Let's see.
No, I think that is, again, helpful for moms to hear and also helpful for the health professionals to hear.
Yes, I agree. I'm just making sure that I didn't lose any. I don't think there's been any more comments yet, but I just wanted to check. Okay, so anyway, let me go back. So basically, the reason I shared these is just as a way, because these questions come up so much. And I thought it's important if we're going to talk about this, it wraps into the whole body image and questions we get a lot, and as well as what's really happening. And when you see that every single woman in these studies, in the one study, it doesn't mean every woman ever, but these studies were showing that there's a very high prevalence of diastasis recti, and it's actually normal. So it's your body's way of, it's just like if you breathe when you need to breathe, it's a normal function that's going to happen rather than looking at it as an outlier. I think that's super important to tell patients or to have them understand for training. So let's see. All right. Now, Jessie, we're moving on to, so about programming and progression. I know you and I have talked about this a lot, and this is in a lot of new courses that we have coming out as well, or courses that we do with female athlete, is this idea that what if I go to do weights, I'm now postnatal, and I go to do weights and I'm noticing I'm leaking, or every time I try to do a squat, I leak, or every time I do a box jump, I leak. What, in terms of postnatal fitness, let's go over some recommendations of how they can go back to the higher level activity, but not having these leaking problems, prolapse concerns, and all that.
Mm-hmm. Well, first, what I think we need to remember that I think is often forgotten in terms of postpartum exercise training is progressive overload. This is really so key to remember. It is a basic strength and conditioning principle. And sometimes I think we just forget about it postpartum with our clients. So progressive overload. And that is starting from early postpartum or whenever someone might be returning to exercise or training, and just getting them back into movement in a fashion, in a structured way. Again, if they like structured, that progressively overloads the body over a period of time. And I'm not talking about like a few training sessions, I'm talking about weeks or months, probably postpartum. So getting them back to a point where we have this really solid foundation of function, strength, mobility, whatever it might be. We're not immediately jumping back into the high impact exercise when someone first returns to training. We wouldn't do that with a new strength and conditioning, a new personal training or group fitness coaching client. So let's not do that with postpartum bodies as well. That might be needing some more TLC, that might be needing some more care until they are able to handle and effectively manage those loads and pressures. So getting back into some core and pelvic floor, easy, gentle, low-level exercises, and building up from there, returning to strength training, using body weight, using bands, using dumbbells, kettlebells, and again, progressively overloading the system. I like to see a solid amount of strength training being done before we get back into high impact exercise. Some of my moms really like to run, and I like for that to be a good 6 weeks, maybe even 8 weeks of strength training programming before they get back into handling those high impact loads. It is just a different beast on the body, high impact versus strength training exercise. And on soft tissues of postpartum that might be feeling a little bit more loose or a bit more unstable, or the body just doesn't feel as strong as it used to, I think just developing a solid foundation of strength can be really useful before we even get to the higher impact stuff.
Yeah. And it also would depend. I had someone that was a triathlete. She was a professional triathlete. So in those cases, even then, you still want to have them progress. Maybe just like jog walk, or some sort of like change of terrain where they're on like an incline first, those kinds of things, and then moving them onto a flat ranges. So it just depends. Yes. But with that person, they were already primed their whole life that this person's been a triathlete for years. So they potentially, especially if you can make sure that their pelvic floor and general abdominal wall is okay through some screening, I would say I'd feel more comfortable getting them into higher level activities sooner, as long as we screen those things first. Right. Mm-hmm. But there are some people, like if they've never done a triathlon, but they're like, hey, I'm going to get my new postpartum body. This is it. I'm making it a whole new year. And they start trying to do triathlons, and they're like, 6 weeks out. This is exactly when we're like, hold up, there's no need to really push or race into this. And so I think it does depend on context as well, and where they are as their prior training as well.
What I think is so interesting about working with clients in this capacity is that sometimes we're reining people in and sometimes we're pushing people along. And it is exactly that. It is history, context, knowing so much about the person themselves.
Yeah. And then there's also the joke, and this is, I say this as a pelvic PT, there are some people that get frustrated because they'll say, I was doing CrossFit. I'm now going back to CrossFit after having a baby. And you'll hear gasps like from physical therapists saying, oh, I can't believe you would do that. And they on 4 months of doing clamshell exercises. And the person wants to get back to CrossFit. And I think there is this funny divide of, it's okay to have someone progress, because people don't know that even in like CrossFit or a lot of different weightlifting programs, there's ways to progress that you can do. Even then, you can just start doing a simple step up, or a way of lifting just smaller weights, or getting the movements back, instead of just doing clamshells for 4 months. So there's that too. There's you're missing an opportunity to get, this person's doing more at home when they lift a laundry basket than you're telling them to do in the clinic.
Yeah. And this is why I love strength training for postpartum bodies, because it is the most modifiable form of exercise. We can regress and progress every single exercise to make it work for almost anyone.
Right. Exactly. It's, I'm doing an exercise right now. I mean, I can progress this. Yeah. It's basically, there are ways to progress everything and scale it back down. Yes. So if they say, oh man, I want to get back to a deadlift. Okay. We can even have them, get to a table and just lean over a little bit and come back up, without any weights and just a little movement. So anything can be, like you said, scaled in that sort of way. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things too, then to talk about leaking and that sort of thing. If someone says every time I lift something, I leak, what's typical advice, or what do you say to them?
Yeah, so we want to find out when they're lifting what, if it is on the first time they're lifting something, or if it was the 15th time in a row they lifted that thing. Again, finding out the context around that leaking. And then usually what I'll go to once we have an idea of that is going to the breath first. I think that can be one of the most useful strategies, especially for earlier postpartum moms. So I love Julie Weeb's cue of blow before you go. That's something that I use a lot with my clients, or exhaling on exertion. Not to say that you can never inhale on exertion, because that can totally work too. But I think that if we start that exhale breath even before we start to lift that heavier thing, that can be a really solid strategy for people to use. We hopefully will get this co-contraction, this nice lifting of the pelvic floor, the deep abdominal wall, and it can just give people a bit more support to that whole pelvic floor structure. So the breath, I think, can be really useful. And then we can look at someone's alignment. If the alignment or the body position in which they are lifting is not working for them right now, for example, they are leaking during it, then we just try something different with the alignment. So maybe they're in a really thrusted chest or rib cage position. What if they drop the ribs a little bit? Does that help them? Can we pair that on with the breath? So these are examples of strategies that we can use.
Yeah. And I love that, just changing it up. Instead of saying you can't do that exercise, what can we do to modify it? And anytime I've said that to someone, it's like an aha moment, like, oh, I thought I was just going to have to not do it anymore. It's like, no, let's just change it up. Let's get your legs wider or further in, or figure out modifications so that they can still engage the muscles. It's just not going to lead to them leaking, because that means there's probably too much pressure or problems going on there.
Yes. Yeah. One of the best things that I've learned from Anthony Lowe is just do something different.
Yeah.
So simple.
Yeah. It's so simple. And yet it's like this aha thing, because we're told you do a squat a certain position, your legs, but it's like, no. If they have any kind of dysfunction or problem going on, just modify that movement and then try it and see. And there's no shame in that. When they go to heavier loads, they may have to change to a more optimal position. So we're not saying it's the most optimal position for that exercise, but we are saying, hey, you can still exercise and move. Mm-hmm. There's such a psychological effect of, oh, you mean I can still do that, as opposed to saying stop all your exercises. You're going to go do clamshells and smile in the corner. That's not going to, there's social involved. There's lots of things going on with exercise.
Yes. Yeah. And that is one of my guiding principles as a fitness coach, is getting people to feel successful in exercise. And just over the last few years, I've been finding that if they can find the position, the technique, the form in that exercise that feels best for them, and they're not worrying about a million different cues or having their feet exactly lined up perfectly or their knees tracking out at just the right angle, if they can just do it and feel okay, it's like such a sigh of relief for them.
This is true. Yeah. So I've loved that freedom of playing around with that too. So the leaking, and then something else we talked about earlier that I want to come back around, because there are these different camps in terms of beliefs with running and high activity. You had mentioned, you want to do strengthening first for 6 to 8 weeks, and then you do more of the higher activity. But there's also this delineation that happens where some trainers or health professionals will say no running or jogging until 6 months. And some say wait until a year and all that. And I think I already know where you'd go with it, but I think to say someone should be jogging at 3 weeks, there are still healing things going on for both C-section and vaginal birth. So I think there is some guideline, but I'd like to know what your typical guidelines are in general.
Yes. Yeah. I generally like people to get out of the 4th trimester before we even talk about high impact exercise. So at least 3 months. Most of my people aren't ready at that point anyways. Mentally, they don't feel like it will physically be beneficial to their bodies at that point, just in terms of stress, lack of sleep. But yeah, if we can get people out of the 3rd trimester, just because typically they're not sleeping very well, there's still healing that is happening with the body. But if we can get them out of there, we get them doing some strengthening exercise during that time period. Again, not saying that they're not doing anything through that 4th trimester, that first 3 months postpartum. They absolutely are if they want to. So getting them out of there, hopefully they have done an assessment with a pelvic health PT. I try to recommend for all my clients to see someone just so we can get a better sense of what is going on with the abdominal wall internally in the pelvic floor. These things are going to make up part of the conversation. So while some people might for sure be totally fine at 3 months to get back into some running, some people just might not. It might not be most effective for their bodies. So out of that 4th trimester, doing some strengthening work before getting back into the higher impact stuff is what I'd love to see, and with an assessment from PT added on to that.
Awesome. Yeah. So and as you keep hearing us say, there's not an absolute. It's not like you should never do this at this time, but we kind of know there's healing. And I think that's a great guide. That 4th trimester is being recognized so much more in terms of even mental health as well. And just giving more support and time during that 4th trimester in terms of the last, the 3 months postnatal to make sure that things are healing well. So on this note, before I forget, one of the questions that someone asked was, it's been 3 years, or some people say it's been 15 years since I've had a baby, and I've been leaking with exercise ever since then. Did I miss the window? Am I too late? Like, oh no, I can't believe I'm only learning now. There's something I could have done. So I love handling this. Go ahead and say what your thoughts are.
It's never too late. Never, ever. It's just any time is going to be the right time. Whenever you get this information, whenever you can get the assessment booked, never too late. Always progress that can be made.
Yeah, I think that if you're leaking, there's different reasons for leaking. But when we're talking about leaking with exercise, we're typically talking about the stress urinary incontinence, where there's too much pressure and there may not be enough functional support for whatever reason. It could be the pelvic floor muscles. It could be the way their urethra is positioned. There's a variety of things. Some people, I call it the floppy urethra. Some people just have a urethra that's just been stretched so much, the connective tissue around it, that no matter what they do when they have some sort of coughing, laughing or something, it just is floppy, so it ends up leaking a little bit, okay? But most of what we're talking about is some combination of those things, of having enough pelvic floor support, organ support, decreased intra-abdominal pressure, so that or actually I should say even intra-abdominal pressure, so everything's more even and not pushing in one way or another. If you combine all of those things, what you'll find is that someone that thought that for years they could never get help, if they got the right strengthening exercises, managed better in terms of their prolapse or whatever else is happening that could be changing the intra-abdominal pressure, it's amazing how they could have gone 10 years with leaking, and within 6 to 8 weeks, you have reversed that or changed that when they thought that could never be the case.
Mm-hmm. I find that so fascinating for so many people too, is that they have lived with these things for so long. They were told that it is a normal thing or it'll go away on its own, and it never does. And then really it is in a few sessions or doing some structured programming, and it completely resolves. I mean, truly, the work that you are doing is life-changing for people.
Yeah. And there's been a variety of studies that have looked at it. And I think it's like, and thank you, by the way, the studies are showing, I mean, I think it was like 76 to 97% or so of those that, depending on what study you looked at, those who had stress urinary incontinence could get, with pelvic floor exercises and some sort of addition to that, and dependent on the study, that they were able to completely cure and stop leaking with exercise. So when someone says, well, my mom had it, my grandmother had it, it's just the way it is. Once you have a baby, you're just going to be leaking all over the place. That's just not, doesn't have to be true. Mm-hmm. But I also have always said in recent posts that I've done on Instagram and other social media, I've also said it's important for us to not shame people too, because some people are proud and they say, when I lift, I leak, and that's just what I've decided I want to do. I don't shame people, but what I do try to do is give them education. Say, I'll never say, hey, what are you doing? Why are you choosing to wear pads? Or why are you just leaking there? Because I don't want to shame them if that's what they've chosen, just not to handle it. But I think most of the time when you say, I don't know if you know this, but gosh, there's a way that you could get some help, and you may not even ever have this. Most of the time they're amenable to getting help. Mm-hmm. But I don't like to shame them if they decide not to, and they're really happy just to use pads and those kinds of things. But to say that they don't even have an option, or to not even know that they have an option, has been the issue for me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, just normalizing the conversation so we can take the shame and stigma out, but then knowing that it's not a normal function of the body in most cases.
This is true. Okay, we have a listener question or a reader question, or I don't know what you call it. Okay, so we have a question from Lindsay. Hopefully you're still on. She said, and I'm reading this for the first time, but for CrossFit, when you progress, do you recommend for them to make each workout a no measure once they are worked back up to functional stuff? I'm assuming you mean like no measure, like in terms of weights or other kind of like reps, or let me see what the rest of it is. Oh, meaning initially, if you're going to go back to the gym, don't work for time, focus on quality movement, not how many reps you can get. Got it. How do you get them to approach that mentality once they're actually in the gym in the class? Like in terms of not making about the amount of reps or weight or anything like that, and more just about the movement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a great question. So one of our colleagues, Brianna Battles, she does a lot of work in the CrossFit realm. We love Bri. She talks a lot about athlete brain. And I think that this might be relating to that question, as someone who is competitive. They are an athlete. They want to get back to competing in their gym, in their workouts, with themselves, with others, whatever it might be. So yeah, reining them in a little bit, giving lots of education about what their body might still be going through in terms of healing and recovery. And again, going back to those principles of progressive overload, educating them on what the body might need right now in order to be successful further down the line. I always talk with my clients about this seemingly long path of getting back to all the super fun exercise you want to do postpartum. It's actually the shortest path. If we do things in a progressive manner up front, we can usually mitigate these pains, discomfort, injuries that might come up if we had have just jumped back in hard and fast from the get-go. But definitely love what Bri talks about in terms of athlete brain and understanding that some people really want to get back to the hard stuff right away. And she gives some great advice on the conversations to have around that.
Yeah. That's great, because it's true. I think this is kind of what we're saying. There's individual things. You can still make potentially goals for certain people that are so goal oriented. It could be like, all right, we're going to do as many of these as you can do, but the goal is not to have you leak, or the goal is it can still be within a context for them. But there's some people that just push too hard every time. If I give them 3 exercises, they do 10. If I give them 1, they'll do 5. So we have to figure out for that person. Again, this is why I say I'm a facilitator. I always say, I'm going to give you the best information I can that I think will help you. But then we have to see what you think as well. You know, you're going to have to come back and tell me, did this work for you or not? Or how are you doing with it? Mm-hmm. So we'll work together.
Yeah. And figuring out really the whys behind, people might have that mindset going into the workout too, whether it is about some fears that are popping up for them about their body composition, or about they're fearful of losing skills, they're fearful of losing strength in the gym. There's often lots happening behind the scenes for these people too.
Yes. And on that note, this reminds me of someone who was determined to do a plank for like 7 minutes or 8 minutes or something crazy. And I kept thinking, and finally I just said, listen, I think you can do a plank. You're getting to the point where she could start to do one. But the issue was, but why? Can I ask you why? What is it so important about it? And the answer was, well, I won't have a strong core unless I can do that for 7 minutes. And I realized that the underlying belief all this time was that was the only exercise that was a gauge for them to think that they had a strong core. Mm-hmm. And so it was just almost unwrapping that and saying, actually, can we take a step back? Did you know that may not be the best indicative thing about a core? And I did a lot of education. And then she's like, oh, I didn't want to do that plank contest anyway. I thought that was the only way of showing that I would have a strong core.
Yeah.
So I think we have in this society, like as many wings as you can eat, just throwing some wings down, like you're an amazing eater or whatever it is. It's like everything's about these like, hardcore, but it doesn't necessarily mean that shows anything about how strong your core is actually.
Yes. Yes. So much of this, what I find too, is giving permission to people to not have to work super hard. Because a lot of people that I get coming to me are type A people, or now they're moms and they're feeling like they have to do all the things super well. And what if you just don't? Can that be okay too?
This is true. Mm-hmm. So I know I'm keeping a little bit longer than expected. So I know baby maybe waking up and all that, but what I was going to, I think one of the things that it would be an issue if I think we didn't mention this at all in terms of postnatal fitness, because it's such a huge component and most women out there don't know about this or don't know what to do. I just want to touch on prolapse a little bit. That's okay. And pelvic floor stuff. Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to actually do one quick share here and just tell me if Jessie, if you're like, I must go.
He just woke up, so probably need to eat.
Okay. All right. So yeah, let me know and I'll gladly, let's see here. let me go to current slide here and just show you. Okay, so in the context, many of you that may be listening to this are very much aware of prolapse, and this is just one graphic that we sometimes use. But I just wanted to tell you that someone will say, I feel pressure, I have a bulging down there. What do I do? Can I work out? And I want to tell you that most women postnatal, if they do have a prolapse is very normal, just like diastasis. If they have a prolapse, it's a grade 1 or 2. And what we mean by prolapse real quick is if this is looking at a side view and you have the rectum coming back here, you have the vaginal opening here and the vaginal canal where you have the cervix and uterus. And then you have the urethra in its own separate area here. Basically, there's different kinds of prolapses. So you can have what's called a urethrocoel or a cystourethrocoel. So the bladder and the urethra can come down, and they don't actually go into the vagina. They just press against it or into the wall there. If you have a rectocoel, that's when the back part, the anal area, can push, again, not inside the vagina, but basically push, like to cramp up space in here, and so forth. So we can have different kinds of prolapses going on. But most women, this is very important, most women have a 1 or 2 grade prolapse, meaning it's not significant. A grade 3 prolapse, and this is why I was showing this quickly, is when you actually have, now you have for example, in this case, a bladder is actually, when they strain, it actually goes outside of the introitus is the opening of the vagina. It actually goes outside of it. You'll actually see it push out. That's a grade 3. A grade 4 is they can just be at rest and the thing is just pushing out. So if a woman's in a shower and they look down and they see something hanging out of their vagina, that is probably a grade 3 or a 4. As opposed to most women who have a lot of pressure or feel a lot going on, they could just have a 1 or a 2 prolapse. So the reason I bring that up is for most women who are exercising and say, oh man, I have a prolapse, should I be exercising? Most of the time, everything we've talked about, they're relatively safe as long as they're doing progressive loads. They're going to be okay at a 1 or a 2. What we're really concerned about are those that we see to have a larger 2, almost a 3 or a 3 or a 4. That's more of a case where there could be a lot more going on, and we would not recommend them doing high level activities or heavy lifting. Someone that has a 2 that is concerned about it getting worse, we can start talking about, I don't know if it's on this next slide coming up. I'm not going to go over these pictures right now, but yeah, there's different pessaries, and I throw this in there quickly because for postnatal fitness, especially in the US, it is not even given as an option for most women postnatally. They don't even know, they've never even heard of a pessary. They don't even know that there's something you can put in that will decrease the pressure potentially of that prolapse and allow someone to work out without as much pressure and without as much of that feeling, and then take it out when they want to after. Mm-hmm. So I had to get that in.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's important, right?
Yeah, such important information. And many of my clients are working out strength training with pessaries. Their prolapse are very well managed. So 100% possible to keep exercising and doing forms of exercise that you actually like.
And did you find that those people that were using it, did they find out from you, or was it like they just all knew about it, or what was the information that was given to them? How did they find out about it?
Yeah, it's mostly from them doing their own research. From me,
yeah.
They're Googling. Yeah, what's cool right now in my province in Canada is that pelvic health PTs are starting to be able to fit pessaries. Mm-hmm. So yeah, hopefully the tide is starting to change a little bit.
Yeah, we're also trying to push to get that in the US as well. Because in Australia, that's a thing that is just so fantastic that pelvic physios there, women's health physios, can actually do some fitting of pessaries. And you go into the office and they say, oh, you want to do some sport? So let's go ahead and fit you for one. But in the US, primarily, if they think they have a prolapse and they're concerned about working out higher level, or they just would feel better with one, they can certainly do home. There's a home kit they can try, which is not necessarily good for every kind of prolapse, but it's something that they can try at home, the Impreza. But then fitting of them can take place at a urogynecologist office. So this would not just happen at a gynecology office. You have to go to urogynecologists who have someone in their office that specifically fits for pessaries. Mm-hmm. So I'm putting this on the radar because you may not have it yourself, but you may be training or working with these women who have problems with this. And I'm telling you, it's just not normal, regular information that's out there for people to know that pessaries are usually reserved when people talk about a woman that's in their 70s that suddenly has something falling out. That's when they start talking about it. But we're talking about an athletic population that in general, especially in the US, there's not been enough information or push for these women to get pessaries. So it's so important.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is start to wrap up a little bit. Like I said, we could talk forever about all sorts of things. I'm trying to see if there's anything else. Do you guys have any other questions for Jessie before she runs away and takes care of mom stuff? Just want to see if there's anything else that you guys have questions about. Thank you, Christina, on the info and the pessaries. I get really passionate about it, as you can tell, because there's gaps in care and postnatal. And this is one of the big gaps in care is diastasis and understanding about that and prolapse and getting people active. When you go to the gynecologist or OB and you say, hey, I want to get back to activity, they don't have training in what to do or what that looks like. So that's why we want to get as much information out to all of you to help in this area. Emily is asking, just any recs for teaching correct movement strategies online? So yeah. I don't know how you handle that. Do you mean like showing the movements? I'm assuming like just on a video or something?
Yeah, that would be my guess of what she's wondering. Yeah, it takes practice. Absolutely. I think that owning your coaching skills and your ability to cue is so key if you are going to be coaching people online. As I mentioned earlier, I think making your exercise programming, the exercise design, the workout design as foolproof as possible so that people are able to do the exercises that you are giving them as well as possible in a way that is supportive of their body. So what we do is demos of all exercises that are in the program, video demos. And then we have lots of coaching tutorials breaking down the specific movements in even more detail. And then always encouraging people to film themselves during the exercise, post it so we can give direct coaching feedback. Yeah, these are some of the ways. But again, there's pressure on the coach to make the exercise programming super solid.
Yeah, and the follow-up Emily said is, do you watch their form via video? And that's a great point because they get so concerned about form, and that is important, and you can certainly watch it. But sometimes, just like we were talking about, it's tweaking it. They're like, every time I do this exercise, I leak. And you could just say, all right, let's have you move your feet this way. And they say, oh, I'm not doing that. But do you do that as well? Are you watching form, or are you more just disseminating information?
Yeah, we watch form as well. Sometimes they will send in videos. What I also try to remind myself of, though, because I can feel a lot of pressure as a coach about this and as a recovering perfectionist, is that it's just exercise and it's just strength training. And most of the time they are going to be okay. And I don't want to put too much pressure on them to be needing it to be perfect. I just want to get them moving most of the time. So again, making the exercise tutorials as simple and clear as you possibly can, and then having the programming be really solid, and then giving them some freedom to go. And if they need help, to come back to you.
Yeah, and Emily's saying, sounds like using video for instructing is better than a handout. I think, if you can, for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. Pictures are great, but video, yeah.
I was going to say a handout's always, if you just want to get started and giving people information, sure, just do it. But yeah, video I think is better too. And Karen's saying pressure control and pessary is key to share. Yes. Yeah, I like to go on tangents about that because it's so important and it should be key to talk about. So any other final questions and we'll wrap up. So tell us about one of the things I brought you on now is because you're in the middle of, we're getting people signed up for the Postnatal Fitness Specialist certification. And this is for really anyone that has an interest in helping. It's any kind of healthcare fitness professional or even those that are just learning or starting to get into training. Getting them feeling comfortable about what are the things, these are some of the things we talk about, that you talk about, what we talked about today. Getting someone to feel really, really confident and comfortable working with someone in the postnatal period.
Yes. Yeah. And this, it's hard to believe, but this is really just scratching the surface on what we cover in the Postnatal Fitness Specialist Academy. So it is a 10-week, 10-module education course that is delivered fully online. We have myself and then 20 plus experts in fitness and pelvic health. Tracy is one of them. She speaks on postpartum pelvic health, sexual health in the course. We just, as you were saying, we want the trainers, coaches, anyone who comes into the course who is passionate about helping moms to feel really confident in their abilities to be able to help postpartum populations, and specifically in fitness coaching is where we are trying to go with this, but so many people across many different professions have come into the course: naturopathic doctors, dietitians, physios, chiropractors, midwives, doulas, because we talk about so many different topics in the academy: body image, mental and emotional health, specific fitness programming strategies. We talk about race, racism, the access to healthcare. So we're just giving these professionals and these people the education on so many different levels to be able to help support their clients, their patients, themselves in whatever they might need. So yeah, registration is open now. Today is Wednesday, October 17th, and it's open until Monday, October 22nd. The last class of 2018. The next class won't be until mid-2019 at some point, likely April or May. So if you love this information, if you're passionate, if you just want to dig in even more, the Academy can be a fantastic resource for you.
Yeah, and we're gonna put the links to that. We'll put the links, and also these kinds of interviews we also do a lot in the Global Pelvic Health Alliance. So we're going to explain a little bit more about that. So after this is done, we will drop some links in of how you can sign up for that if you want. And also we're going to keep pushing our directory and the Global Pelvic Health Alliance too, because we want as many of you guys in this together so that we can keep helping people all over the world. So thank you so much for your time. How do they find you on Instagram, or where's the preferred way you want them to find you on social media too?
Yes. Yeah. You can find me at my website at jessiemundell.com or on Facebook and Instagram at Jessie Mundell. And thank you so much for having me. It's so fun.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's always great to talk to you. I know it's like, just like, chatting with a friend, and, all the stuff we would probably say anyway, like we would just be chatting about.
Yeah.
So this is what we do anyway. So thank you so much. And I hope you guys, let me get out of this so that, yeah, there we go. Here we go. So I can actually get to my screen here. But yeah, it was a pleasure to be here. And you guys, even if you're watching this on replay, if you have more questions or things that come up, please post them in here and we'll take a look and see if there's anything else we can answer. I know this is in the middle of the day and not everyone has the freedom to just sit down and listen to us. But we do hope that you got something out of this. And if you have questions, let us know. All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.